Hello and welcome to the Last Week in Denmark podcast. Each week, two of our hosts talk through some of the top stories that happened last week in Denmark. We focus on how they impact internationals living here. So if that sounds like you, well then, welcome home. You are in the right place and we're very glad you're here. I'm Fionn O'Toole, and joining me this week for episode 10 of season 4 is Kulpita Bosle. This week we're going to be exploring the government's plans to scrap the National Integration Council, a proposed ban on social media for under-15s, and the worrying news that half of Denmark's species are at risk, and nearly 50% of them now live under highly unfavourable conditions. Before we get going, we would love to ask one thing from you. If this conversation resonates with you, if you find it interesting, if you find it useful, it would be so helpful if you could screenshot this episode and share it on social media. You can also share it directly from Spotify if you listen on Spotify. We're here to help internationals in Denmark stay informed and feel connected. So doing that helps us reach more people that are just like you. Now, hi Kulpita, how are you?
Hiya. I'm trying to keep warm. It has suddenly dipped. It's become cold and very, very windy. In my experience over the years, Culture Night always has the worst weather.
Yeah, I think it's definitely coordinated to, launch full in with the conspiracies straight off the bat. I think they're controlling the weather to drive people into the museums. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this. It's been ages since the two of us actually recorded together, and I looked, and it was the 24th of May was the last time we had a recording together. And that definitely puts the autumn weather, I think, in perspective, because 24th of May, I was probably already finding it too warm. I have to admit,
Yeah.
It is a bit more windy than I would love it.
Yeah.
But I'm in my element right now. I love this a bit cooler autumn weather. I get to layer again. I get to finally look somewhat put together in my outfits. Not that I ever would go so far as to say that I look good, but moderately better than the sweaty shorts and a t-shirt that I live in throughout much of the summer. So I'm pretty happy that it's October and it's getting a bit colder, but I know not everyone is.
I know. The only good part about this weather is that it absolutely is okay to cozy up on your sofa and read a book and have some hot chocolate or wine or whatever you're into. And it is so acceptable to not go out and do things, and you can just be a homebody. It's the best time of the year, minus the no sunshine, of course.
That's true. I have to admit, I have a slight challenge with the cozying up on the sofa, because if I lie down on a sofa and you put a blanket on me, I'm asleep.
Yeah, fair enough.
There's no, picturesque candles and a book and hygge time with my partner or anything. I'm done. I'm asleep. So for me, it has to either be no blanket and a bit cold, or snoring away on the sofa.
You're probably not integrated enough to be caffeinated enough to be doing
Exactly,
that.
Exactly. My mother-in-law, she used to drink so much coffee, and she would drink like coffee at 11:30 before bed. And I remember one of my sisters-in-law asking but how do you sleep? And her just kind of looking and going oh yeah, I don't. I really struggle to sleep sometimes. And I know she's cut back on it over the last few years, but it was like this cultural moment of, oh, I know I've always done this, but maybe I could do it differently. So yeah, that's definitely an integration that I still have to get into. But that's going to be my personal responsibility from now on, because our first topic this week is the closure of the plans to abolish the National Integration Council by June 2026. Have you heard of this?
I have, and distressing on the face of it. But then again, I do not have too much faith in Mr. Stocklund and his campaign. To be honest, it also, like we spoke earlier, stings a lot of upcoming elections, and they want to please certain voters, and immigration, integration, and everything related to it is a very, very popular topic, not just in Denmark, but across Europe and the UK and the US, everywhere. It's the hot topic right now in politics.
Absolutely it is. And yeah, so for context, if you haven't listened to our last couple of episodes, there was a reshuffle in the Social Democrat minister team, you could say, the cabinet. I think that's the actual word for it. And immigration hardliner Rasmus Stocklund has been made the Minister for Immigration and Integration. And one of his first kind of acts, so to speak, is to announce the plan for the closure of this. And I think you're spot on. So it's no secret that immigration is kind of hot button politics in Denmark ever, but really across Europe and much of the world at the moment. And there are elections coming up, and this has been really very often when I see Danish politics mentioned internationally, they do talk about Mette Frederiksen's handling or disarming of the far right by adopting some of its measures or some of its talking points. And to me, this feels maybe like part of that. Is that a bit cynical to either for us or for the Social Democrats?
I don't think it's cynical if you look at it from a political point of view. But I want to take a second and digress a little bit.
Sure.
Do you, Fionn, think that Mette Frederiksen will have a chance again? This would be her third term, and she is the crisis minister since COVID.
She is. I think looking at politics, looking at the chamber in the last few days, it does feel like we are past the era of SMS Meta and that scandal at the very least.
Yeah.
Of course, it comes down to what do people value and do they feel like they are better off than they were before. So many times it is the everyday issues like, affordability and housing and healthcare that do end up taking people's votes rather than scandals or immigration, or maybe like in other countries, like emotive issues like abortion or something like that, right? It's very often the day-to-day that actually drives votes. And I think, yes, we've all seen that inflation has hit. We've all seen that prices in the supermarket have gone up. I did my weekly shopping this week and it was very depressing when she announced what it cost.
I can imagine.
But Denmark has been relatively stable compared to so many other countries. And one thing we often see with uncertainty in the future is that voters do flock to stability. So what's instability am I talking about? Well, one, there's Trump and the US and the tariffs and everything. Mm-hmm. So we have it from the West. And of course, we also have it from the East with Russia and Ukraine and the incursions and drones and everything there. So I wonder, will people opt for the status quo because it's the devil for want of a better word? But there's kind of safety in what we know.
Yeah.
From that point of view, I could see her. I mean, it would be her, I was going to say, or the Social Democrats somehow, but I do think it would be her to take up the reins again. Well, what about you?
I do have this debate a couple of times with myself that she is the known devil, but we see that with Trump as well. He was the known devil. There was no one better than him at that point in time. And you're right, people do flock to stability, and we see the opposite happening in the US, also in France now as well. And I mean, the US government is shut, so they don't really have a government right now, and France is walking in the same direction. So that does bring in a lot of questions, and Mette has been a fort, really, in these times, enough for Denmark to be able to be hosting all the EU leaders and trying to negotiate strategy and finding ways and means to make not just this hybrid war, but just in general, economically, make Europe stronger and more stable. And she has said that in her statements as well, which I think is a great outlook and a better election campaign for her and her party than having Mr. Stocklund in power or in this position right now, scrapping integration councils and policies in its entirety.
Yeah.
It does seem very cynical. I totally agree with it, but I think that is also an election tactic to be so completely absurd that anything else that happens seems doable and plausible.
Yeah, I was really looking at the kind of press release that came out with this, and one of the kind of closing elements, I guess you could say, to it was that Rasmus Stocklund was saying, in addition, we in the government have given ourselves a specific and important task across the entire state to reduce the cost of state administration. The closure of the council also contributes to this. So kind of tempering it in the sense of it's not only telling people that they need to take full responsibility for their own integration and kind of if they want to come here, they have to live by our values. But there's also a grown-up, sensible, cost-saving element to this. And then, not as part of that statement, but still kind of somehow contained within the webpage of the press release, is the line that the proposed closure is expected to result in savings of approximately half a full-time equivalent in 2026 and one full-time equivalent annually thereafter. So that second argument, the economic argument, is not really something I buy, to be honest. John Kerry, the former Secretary of State in the US, had this great line, which is, don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value, right? So it's not like the government had poured money into this before. It's the equivalent of one full-time employee. It's not like they're going to save all that much money going forward. It's the equivalent of one full-time employee. But I do think it is part of this pivot to maybe voters who are on the right when it comes to this issues with immigration and integration. I have to say, the actual text talking about this, it's not society's responsibility to integrate people, it's personal responsibility to integrate people. It reminded me of a quote by a famous conservative politician, Margaret Thatcher, famously talked about, there's no such thing as a society. There are individuals and people must look after themselves first. The government can't do anything except for the people. People have to look out for themselves. And that famously, and her policies famously, were kind of attributed with weakening the social net in the UK. Now, that's maybe a bit of a leap, but it feels somehow playing to that vibe, for want of a better word. And I don't know if post-election period, that is a comparison that Rasmus Stocklund, as a Social Democrat, would love, right? To look back and say, okay, we were giving Margaret Thatcher vibes on that.
That's a controversial role model to have in these times, but it also sounds a bit inspired by Mr. Musk by reducing budget, and the best way to do that is to shut down certain departments in the government. I'm very confident that we will not land in a place where France and the US is. We have a very good opposition. The blue blocs and the green blocs are doing a good job as well of whatever they stand for. But having said that, I did mention when we first spoke about Stocklund that there is only so much he or anyone in his place can do. I think he's a poster child to talk about immigration and to talk about outsiders and third world countries coming into Denmark, and that we don't like it, and it's also appeasing to certain parts of the voters. But there's only so much he or his replacement can do, because there are laws, there are UN laws, there are EU laws. They actually have a EU integration policy, which is about integration and inclusion. They have an action plan for 2021-27, and one of the things it says that it addresses integration barriers in the main policy areas of housing, education, employment, and healthcare. And that is mainly for people who are migrating and asylum seekers as well. So I think this whole immigration thing is not just about people coming into Denmark for studies or for work or accompanying spouses, but it is also clearly pointing out to asylum and people migrating from different parts of the world. And we see very specific wording for these things in the universities who have decided to not accept applications, which is very specific to certain section of religious inclinations.
Absolutely. Hey, enjoying the Last Week in Denmark podcast? Then tell the world about us. In less than 30 seconds, you can nominate this podcast for the Discover Pods 2025 Podcast Awards. You have until the 14th of November to wisely spend 30 seconds glowing, nay, gushing over this pod. But why wait? Go to discoverpods.com/2025-podcast-awards now and nominate us. And don't worry if you didn't get all that. The link and info you'll need to nominate us will be in the show notes as well for this episode. We'll be back after the November deadline to let you know how to vote once all those nominations are in. So thank you so much for helping us spread the word about the Last Week in Denmark podcast. Now, let's get back to the episode. Our second topic actually is something where Denmark is taking the lead, and that is the announcement that the government wants to ban multiple social media platforms for children and young people under the age of 15. I have to say that it is very rare I see a headline where everyone goes, yep, I agree. And I have yet to hear anybody talk negatively about this, which I think is amazing. Amazing in the sense that I am amazed by that. But I don't know, what's your feeling on this? Are you hearing people who want 14-year-olds to have social media profiles, or it kind of feels like a no-brainer, right?
I did actually.
Okay.
Surprisingly and unsurprisingly, the digital ministry or spokesperson from the digital ministry has said that we need to make sure that everybody in Denmark is digitally literate. And I completely agree with that stand. At the same time, I am very confident that we can do that without children having access to phones or the internet for that matter to the age of 15. Having said that, I'm not that backward, even if I'm quite old. I remember when I was in school, and this is 80s, 90s, that we used to have a dedicated half an hour or an hour to access a computer, learn, and also access the internet. So if there was anything we wanted to learn, we wanted to see, get educated in, or whatever that was the time you could do it. And I'm sure that kind of a system has existed in different parts of the world.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this actually ties in maybe more the idea with accessing phones or the internet in general in schools. I see this tying in very much with the rise of AI and the risks of, well, are people just regurgitating AI-generated content? And we've definitely seen more of a shift now towards oral exams and pen and paper, right, within the school setting, which I don't know if this just makes me old-fashioned because that's what I used, but I think wonderful. Like, it is so much more important for kids, for anyone, to actually learn and have understanding around something rather than just learning to regurgitate it or learning to use a system to regurgitate something out and not actually understand things at all. Of course, our world is changing. So, like, AI is going to be a thing, like the calculator was, right? But I think with social media, you know, I remember I was probably 14 the first time I got a social media profile. I never had a negative experience at that point in my teenage years with social media. But what it reminded me of, thinking about this, was I remember there was like an anti-marijuana campaign. I can't even remember where it was. It might have been in the US. It was a few years ago. It was as a lot of places were legalizing marijuana. And it was kind of saying like, okay, you know, parents, you probably smoked a spliff back in your day and it was all fine and no one died. And that's fair enough. But just so you know, the people who are growing weed, they have selected for the stronger strains, and it's now approximately 50 times stronger and more potent in THC than the weed you were smoking right back in the 60s. And, you know, I'm not here to advocate or condemn marijuana one way or the other, right? But it just reminded me of that conversation that, like, I was thinking to myself, like, I remember my first Bebo profile. That was what we used in Ireland before Facebook dominated everything. And I just occasionally posted a photo taken on a digital camera and then uploaded, or you would create very cringe quizzes about yourself. And it was all fine. But that was really before the algorithms and before social media was so pervasive. There was an opinion survey in 2024 where 14% of 9 to 17-year-olds, that's 9, right, responded that they had experienced digital harassment or unpleasant experiences on Instagram. One, why is a 9-year-old on Instagram? But, you know, I have a cousin who works in content moderation for a large social media platform, which will remain completely nameless. But when he's described his job to me, he describes it as murder, mayhem, and memes. Like, that is the stuff that he's seeing. And it's very good that content is being moderated on social media, but they're not going to catch everything the minute it goes up. Obviously not. And just the, like, stuff that people are getting exposed to, even things that I myself, not seeking out murder or mayhem, right, on social media, but then something awful happens and it gets shown and the algorithm often pushes it. And just thinking like, I'm old enough or sure of myself enough to find those things awful, but be able to kind of somehow deal with that. But if I was 9 or 17 for that matter, like that would have had a horrifying effect on me, I think, seeing that. So I'm completely for this ban. At work yesterday, we had a kind of weekly meeting, and this was mentioned as part of the news. And it was kind of like, quick show of hands, is there anybody who wants their kids to have social media before they're 15? Not a single hand was up.
Yeah.
So one thing, of course, is digital literacy, and super important, and we want to equip kids for the future.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to be dopamine hits and, cyberbullying.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I completely support the ban as well, also on phones and social media itself. I think we should go back to times when you had limited access that was only in the school for 30 minutes max, if at all. But it's also a nudge towards being out in nature, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very jealous of all the kids who get to go to a scope or a hill every day.
Oh, yeah.
And spend their time out in nature. But I think, some of the rhetoric around this, I think, from Mette Fredrickson was that, social media is stealing our children's childhood. I would agree with that. My own kids are younger, but they don't have social media, and I would be so cautious about them engaging with it at all. Interestingly enough, I saw that Meta actually came out welcoming the ban, but of course they said that they feel like they have been described as a monster, which is very harsh rhetoric. You'll excuse me if my heart doesn't bleed too much for Meta. But the one thing I thought that was a little bit disappointing in this whole story, because overall this is a story I think is great, is the fact that the bill, actually like a legal bill on the age limit, does not appear in the government's legislative programme for the upcoming parliamentary year, which was published last week. And if it's not adopted until the next parliamentary year, it could easily clash then with the parliamentary elections, which have to be held before November 1st, 2026. So one thing is talking about this bill, and I think great, and let's do it. But the other is the actual legislative process and getting that moving, because I've seen so many times when something great is proposed and then there is an election and everything to a degree gets reset as governments are, formed, there's negotiations, and so much stuff falls by the wayside. And I would really hate for something like this to be part of that, because it does feel like Denmark is really leading the way on this, and I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather have price drops on sugar and stupid things like that drop between the chairs instead of important things like banning phones and social media for children.
Absolutely.
I also want to be mindful at the same time that all of these news bits that are coming out in recent weeks and months are all from the point of view of the election, like you rightly mentioned. So we have to be very mindful that these things should be taken with a pinch of salt. There was also the mention of deepfakes and protecting children and images that are out there from being used for whatever harmful materials as well. So that is also a proposal, and everything we hear now is a proposal. Some are the most silliest, unthinkable things, and some are very, very serious, and some are, something that could not happen. And there are some like the integration councils, which, even if they went away, which will have a ripple effect on other things, we'll also see other things that will effectively be introduced to help the same thing.
Well, speaking of things that are hopefully going to improve, we unfortunately have something that is going at the moment completely the wrong way. And that brings us to our final topic for today, which is the fact that more and more animal species in Denmark are being listed as threatened. There's been an enormous review of the 88 species and 60 habitat types that we have in Denmark. I believe it comes from Aarhus University. And it was presented last week to the government and parties in the Danish Parliament. And basically, we are at risk of losing these species and habitats if the trend, basically, of how they're going is not reversed. There was a report 6 years ago which shocked many people because it revealed that species and habitats were at risk of being lost. And unfortunately, 6 years later, rather than things getting better, they have gotten dramatically worse. So the proportion of species that are living in severely unfavorable conservation status has increased from 32% to 49%.
Yeah.
And that's tough to hear, I think.
It is. I saw this reportage on Danish radio, Denmark radio, about very clever scientists out in the forests talking about how trees are not dense enough. They're not having enough leaves closer to the bark. They're only leaves and vegetation in the outer or periphery of a tree, for example, which has lived for centuries and years and years and years. So it's not just the animals, but it's also the forests that are thinning out. Luckily, they're not totally depleting. But at the same time, I do miss seeing an otter when I'm out in nature. And, there are areas where you can see otters. And I have seen them. And they're just the most...
They're wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, of course, they're very, very cute and entertaining. But they are also such curious animals. And just last year when I was out taking a walk, I missed them. I didn't see them anywhere. Very, very disappointing. It broke my heart.
Absolutely. And I think there is something so magical about seeing animals that we don't see every day, right? It's not particularly exciting to see a magpie unless you're my 2-year-old daughter, and then it's like huge, huge news. But actually just yesterday, as I was picking up my kids and cycling home, there was a kestrel, which is a type of a bit like a hawk, that just flew right down over my bike and then was kind of circling, looking for some prey. And it is these moments of magic. And I think we have that. It's so emotive, particularly with the larger wild animals that we have. But at the same time, it can often be a bit easy, I think, to feel hopeless, right? Because we see these reports. And if you know, I think, anything about what's causing a lot of this, the vast majority of issues and pollution, they are caused by larger companies, right? It could be large agricultural producers with pollution and runoff. It could be fossil fuels, but very often it's habitat destruction, all right? And I want to give our listeners 3 practical things they can do that actually genuinely will make a difference. A small difference, but they will genuinely make a difference, because when it feels like there's nothing you can do, it can be really easy to kind of fall into climate despair. So do you want to hear what the first one is?
Yes, please.
Okay. If you have a garden, it does not have to be a big garden. It can actually be a tiny garden. If you have a garden of any way, shape or form, make a pond. And that pond, again, doesn't have to be big. If you have an old kid's bath, like a baby bath, if you have a bucket, anything like this, really, the rollers you put under your bed, the plastic ones, those, perfect. A frog or something like that, they will lay their eggs in a puddle on the side of the road. But if you give them the space, they will come. And having that little oasis of water, maybe a couple of plants as well, but it doesn't have to be fancy at all. It is like a stepping stone to so many things, because you will get insects, you'll get things like dragonflies. That will then lead to reptiles and amphibians like salamanders and frogs. And frogs are what's called a keystone species. So they're really important in the kind of biodiversity web. A lot of things eat them. They also eat a lot of things as well. And guarantee you, if it takes a bit of time, but if you build it, they will come. Birds will also come and drink from it. So it's awesome. It's really, really easy to do. There's so many resources online to find out how to do it. And you do not need to spend money on it. You can use things you have lying around the house most of the time. That's one. The second is when we get past Danish winter and you're looking out and spring is starting to happen, very often the first flowers that you see are dandelions, and everybody goes, oh no, we got these weeds. It's very tempting to get rid of them. Don't get rid of them that early. We call them weeds, like they grow anywhere, right? The reason they do that is because they're really tough and they've adapted to grow in environments that other things can't, like early spring when it's really cold. But that's basically a bee's breakfast. Mm-hmm. So when bees are kind of waking up a bit after the winter, these are the first flowers. This is like their breakfast. And if we're going in and cutting them all down, that's really, really tough for bees and other pollinators. And similarly, at the end of summer, right, you see all your flowers start to die off and they have the dead heads. And it's called deadheading when you chop all those off to make your bush then look a bit nicer. Try not to do that if you can too soon, because again, that's like the dessert. That's a really important food source for pollinating insects then. And then maybe you don't have a garden, but maybe you have a cat. And if you have a cat, this is point number 3, it's so much better if it's an indoor cat. I love cats. I'm a cat person and a dog person. I don't know if that just makes me indecisive, but I love cats. I had cats growing up and they were outdoor cats, and we used to be amazed at every summer they would bring home like a dozen frogs, like live frogs that they would have found as presents, and we would have to rescue them. And that was cute when we were kids, and now it's like, oh God, they're an absolute menace for all the kind of wild animals, whether it's a hedgehog or a cute little field mouse or a squirrel or birds, right, particularly. So as cute and cuddly as they are, they're even cuter and cuddlier if they live indoors rather than outdoors.
Keep your cats indoors, people.
Yeah. So those are my 3 very, very simple things that you can do to really genuinely make a big difference in your area. And if you don't have a garden, here's a bonus tip. You can do what's called guerrilla gardening. Get a bit of clay, get some native wildflower seeds or native flower seeds, pack it into the clay, let it dry out, and then you can keep some of those in your pocket. If you're, I don't know, grungy and crunchy like me, you can also keep them in a bag. But then if you're going out and you see that there's maybe a building site or something that has a lot of just earth but no nature, just chuck some of them out. It's not going to harm anyone. It's not not illegal or anything. But when the rain comes, the clay will kind of melt and the seeds will bloom. So you can create little patches for the insects.
Wow, incredible.
So yeah, I don't know. I always think it's really important to be a bit hopeful about some of these things, even though it's a really serious topic.
I mean, incredible tips there, Fionn. I think some of them are very, very easy to do. I also agree that littering with wildflower seeds is totally allowed and okay. One must do that. I have people in my apartment building here who do that often around springtime, or even some winter wildflowers as well. They'll start throwing them out now.
Yeah.
And I do have a neighbor who has this. She is so passionate about her balcony garden. I think she's done an incredible job. I could never keep up with that. But at the same time, I am also shocked to learn that Denmark has just one natural park, which is mind-blowing to know that when Denmark is such a big stress on nature and then they just have one.
It is wild, and they launched the most expensive green tripartite agreement, and there's a positive, show me your budget and I'll show you what your priorities are, your values.
Yeah.
There is a budget for it, and yeah, I think one national park has been allocated for that. And that's, of course, such a challenge with habitat destruction. We need to kind of protect what we have. And actually, we are getting close to where we need to wrap up. But if you'll humor me, I actually have a poem that I think maybe, if you're feeling a bit apathetic or doom and gloom about the world and, what can we all do, it's something that really helps me.
Go for it.
I'm going to be honest, it's in Irish, but I will give you, after each verse, I will give you the English translation because I have a sneaking suspicion not many of our listeners speak Irish, and my own is very rusty. But it's by a guy called Sean O'Riordan, who was one of the most important and influential Irish language poets in modern times. And I just think it's a wonderful mix about caring for humanity and nature in the same vibe. So, Ní cheadmhach neamh him, ní chuil, ní lawan, ní bhac, da chuirtigh dia níl fear, nach dúlgas dún ar las, níl bhean, níl cheadmhach nav him, a dhéanamh dá nimní. There's not a fly, a moth, a bee, a man or woman created by the gods whose welfare is not our responsibility. To ignore their predicament isn't on. Níl yalt iglán ní yalt, nar chui dún súil an ash, a clucán fád imprán gaon, ar dinas na háver. There's not a madman in Mad Valley who we shouldn't sit with and keep company, since he's sick in the head on our behalf. Níl áit, níl sruch, níl sca, dar gulta iad níl lach, bíad thuis here no has, no cheart dún macnamh ar a shuiv, legaon is le ballacht. There's not a place, stream or bush, however remote, or a flagstone, north, south, east or west, that we shouldn't consider without affection and empathy. Da fui un Afric has, da erde I galach, is quid din iad o hart, nil ot food no chine, nach aun a sauli sinne. No matter how far South Africa, no matter how distant the moon, they're part of us by right. There's not a single spot anywhere we're not part of. We issue from everywhere. Ni chadavak nav him. Apathy is out.
Hear, hear.
And with that, I think we can wrap up this episode of the Last Week in Denmark podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you will check out our other episodes. We've talked about a lot of them, I think, actually here in terms of topics that have come across multiple weeks. And we also hope you'll check out the Last Week in Denmark newsletter on Substack and in your email inbox. Kalpita, it's been such a pleasure chatting.
Likewise. I hope to be co-hosting with you again very soon.
Absolutely.
We can't be 5 months apart.
Absolutely not.
From one to the other.
Till next time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, this is Kalpita and Golda, co-hosts of the Last Week in Denmark podcast. Did you know Last Week in Denmark offers sponsored content in the newsletter? Our reporters are producing original articles and content tailored for internationals in Denmark.
So if you have a business our readers should know about, let us write about it. Get in touch with us at reporter@lwid.dk. You can also reach out to us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Last Week in Denmark.